While I make every effort to broadcast correct information, I'm also still learning. I will double check all my facts, but realize that healthcare is a constantly changing science and art. One doctor or healthcare provider may have a different way of doing things from another. I welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. I take no money from supplement or device companies. By listening to this podcast or reading this blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice or to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your healthcare provider for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast or the website. Under no circumstances shall any guests or contributors to the podcast or blog or any employees, associates, or affiliates of the Boss Body podcast be responsible for damages arising from use of the podcast or the blog. This blog or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing the standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or the blog.
What's up, guys? It's Dr. Tim Jackson with another episode of the Boss Body Podcast, Metabolic Health. We all know about it, but we tend to think about it in terms of weight loss, weight gain, calories in, calories out. But it's so much more than that. And it's connected to our overall health as well as our mental health. So I brought in two OGs of the biohacking game, the first ladies of biohacking, Miss Lauren Sambataro and Miss Renee Belz. They are related despite differences in last name. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. So excited to be here. Thank you for calling us the first ladies of biohacking. Love that.
Yeah, you got the white curtains in the back. I feel like it's kind of like a presidential type theme, you know?
Yeah, you got the Oval Office kind of look there. Yeah.
Oh,
Exactly.
not intended, but I will take the title. I will share the title gladly.
Off camera, we were talking about how I've been messaging back and forth with your dad. And, you know, we're products of our environment. And both of you were probably annoyed by the biohacking stuff or whatever he called it back in the day. But what was it like growing up with Dr. Jean Sambataro? And were you required to eat organic, or was it mostly organic, non-GMO? Tell me about growing up.
Oh, not what people expected. And I don't know that we were annoyed. We just, I don't know, didn't quite take the biohacking seriously because it didn't have a name back then. It wasn't called biohacking, but he had, red light devices, low level laser, PEMF mats that we laid on and played on, and all kinds of essential oils and homeopathy. And they were just toys to us, unfortunately. And on the food front, they weren't super strict. I mean, it was the 80s. So it was like the time of the frozen bagged vegetables, like the bird's eye cream spinach is what I'm remembering, like TV dinners.
Right.
We always joke like our dad was the OG biohacker, but we still ate plenty of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Like I definitely had Wendy's milkshakes and potatoes on my way home from ballet class. So there was definitely an evolution in terms of quality of food.
Right.
So I don't want people to think that we've been like top-notch nutrition since we were infants. We definitely had to find our way and crash and burn a little bit and find ways to kind of step back into that and nourish our bodies.
Renee, what about you? How did you feel growing up?
Yeah, I remember more so like witnessing our dad trying different diets. Like I remember when he was on like the soy protein kick for a while. He did fruitarian. He used to do water fasting for 3 to 5 days. And we never did it with him as kids, but I remember watching him just experiment with different things. And that was probably our first lesson in like an N of 1 experiment, watching him do all that. And I don't know why this sticks out in my mind, but I remember the switch to organic peanut butter. It was like devastating for me. I'm like, you mean no more Jif or Peter Pan peanut butter? What is this organic stuff?
Right.
But I remember that.
Yeah, it's definitely an evolution. And then I think once I got off to college and then I was exposed to a lot more a lot more junk food, the fast food in the cafeteria on campus.
Mhm.
That's when I was like, oh, wait, our parents actually had a lot of healthy food in the house. I didn't even realize.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
Did that
all the biohacks were always pretty cool. And it actually was really helpful because we were both ballet dancers. And so we had
okay.
our fair share of like little injuries and pain and inflammation. And our dad always would swoop in with the latest and greatest technology to help us out. So it's
That's
great.
Yeah.
awesome. Do you think the early introduction of healthy foods, or relatively speaking, healthy foods, did that make it easier to keep going to the level that you are now?
I think it was more the subconscious exposure to the experimentation and the curiosity that was always such a driving trait of my dad's. He was just super curious, always wanted to keep learning. And I think we picked that up energetically over time, and we realized, like, with through our own health challenges and going to college and being exposed to junk food, like Renee said, we started to be curious ourselves, because that was taught to us in so many ways. It was modeled to us in so many ways. So that curiosity, and I think I would say like healthy skepticism was definitely in there, and a desire to keep learning. So we learned to not take no for an answer, to keep looking for answers, to keep asking questions, to ask better and better questions. Like the journey just continues. And I think that arc happened alongside us being exposed to different health challenges. And so we were kind of forced to become our own biohackers, but we knew that it was possible to find these answers.
Yeah, absolutely. And so before we switch over to metabolic health, you ladies went to college. Was it for health, or did you study health
Oh
in
no.
college?
Oh no.
No,
Part of me
no.
wishes I did. I'm like, why did I not study science? But at the time, I was not into that at all. I went to school for dance performance, and I got a business minor, which I didn't do anything with. I don't remember any of it. And I'm like, oh man, I wish that I had studied biology and chemistry, because I'm studying all that now. But at the time,
Right.
wasn't interested.
And what
Yeah,
about
yeah.
you, Renee?
Yeah, I actually got my undergrad in international business, which
Okay.
was like always my dream. Like freshman year in high school, I already knew what I wanted to go to college for, kind of thing. And I was actually forced to take a biology class to get my Bachelor of Science. They made me take it, and I hated it at the time. That was 20 years ago. So, but I think everything happens for a reason. I learned a lot. And honestly, undergrad, I think, is more about becoming an adult, like being out in the world, how to really live on your own. I think that's really the big takeaway from undergrad. But then soon after I graduated, I got my dream job actually in international business, realized I hated it. I didn't want to sit at a desk all day typing away on the phone, and then left. And actually, thanks to my parents, I went to them for advice. I was pretty upset because my dream job wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And my dad said, well, what would you be reading on a Friday night if you just had spare time? Like, what would you be reading for fun? I was like, oh, well, nutrition books, stack of nutrition books on my nightstand. He says, that's what you have to do for a living. Went back, got my master's, and here we are so many years later. So it all worked out.
Absolutely. I mean, if it makes you feel better, I remember going through organic chemistry, cell and molecular biology. And yeah, we studied the mitochondria a lot, but not once did they mention, okay, you can do this to improve a person's quality of life. You can do this to help expedite healing. You can do this to mitigate disease and promote overall health span and lifespan. And so I'm like, I would have been so much easier to pay attention and study if they would have told me like the cool stuff that I could do to help people out, help myself out. But
Yeah.
The cool
mitochondria,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, the batteries of the cell. So you ladies obviously talk a lot about mitochondrial health, and that plays a role in metabolic health, an extremely important role. I think we've seen different stats, anywhere from 10 to 15% of Americans are metabolically healthy. Um, how did we get here? Obviously, it's multifactorial. We could do a whole week-long podcast on this, but what are some of the top variables that you ladies see?
So much in the
Yeah.
environment. I think a lot of it is out of our control. It's just the modernization of the world and increasing technology and accessibility, which has made us more comfortable through things like air conditioning, to just being more sedentary. And then, the onslaught of EMFs air pollution, noise pollution, or dealing with stress less and less ideally these days. And then, there's all the physiological ramifications of that. If we don't handle our stress well, then it affects our gut health. And then we just have this like really negative feedback loop that's really difficult to get out of. So it is multifactorial. So for us, we really just like to simplify it. Let's just talk through the basic architecture of your life. Are you getting consistent sleep, like consistent sleep wake schedule, wake up time, bedtime? Do you have good sleep hygiene? Like, are you dimming the lights, or are you letting your body naturally produce melatonin? Are you getting good movement practices? Are you getting enough sunshine? Are you using cleaner beauty and household products? I mean, these sound like really basic things, but we can't nitpick all the downstream effects and pains and ailments if we don't have that basic architecture. So sometimes it really is just covering the basics, like over and over again, and making sure that this is integrated and sustainable for people.
Yeah, I think the basics aren't sexy. People want to jump to hormones or hormone replacement. You mentioned electrolytes, and they're like, what? You know?
Oh, yeah. Hydration. So many people are dehydrated. They're like, when I drink water all day long, I'm like, well, maybe it's more complicated than that, unfortunately. Yeah.
You should see the looks on, you ladies have probably experienced this, but when you tell someone drinking too much water without electrolytes may actually dehydrate you further. What? No, it doesn't. And they pull out a book, and I'm like, okay, yep, turn to the front cover. Sponsored by Merck, Pfizer. Okay, there's your answer.
Yeah. Well, and then I don't know if you saw in the headlines recently, this mom of 2 that died from drinking too much water. I've had so many clients asking me about that. Is that true? You can drink too much water, and so we have to get into that whole conversation. But it's like we went from not drinking enough water to just drinking so much dead water, right? Without the minerals. So
yeah. Toxic water. Yeah.
Or toxic water.
And Renee, what do you see with clients in terms of the top variables that impact metabolic health?
I think I have to put sleep at the top of that. And Lauren briefly mentioned sleep. I think sleep optimization is really a great place to start, because we know when we get sleep functioning optimally, everything else falls into place a little bit easier. And I personally experienced this. I was definitely in the mindset of 4 to 5 hours of sleep is enough. I can function, just get some caffeine going. And I totally crashed and burned from that. So that didn't work out too well for me. But we know that just one night of sleep deprivation can throw off our glucose and insulin response for the next 24, 48 hours. So I really like to start with sleep. And so many people are still like, I got to wake up at 5, go to the gym, counting calories, right? It's still like that calorie in, calorie out mentality. And when I say, maybe we skip that morning workout and get that extra hour of sleep, people are like, what? Why would I do that? And so I think sleep is more important. And I have a background primarily in nutrition, but I think sleep is a better place to start. And the nutrition obviously is a huge part of metabolic health. I mean, the toxic food supply we're dealing with, lack of nutrients, overly processed, ultra processed, the genetically modified foods, probably too many carbs for most people. And then the other extreme is the carb phobic people, right? I think we do need some carbs, but it's different for everyone. What's your age, gender, physical activity, your genetics, your gut microbiome, your hormones, what's your health goal? What's your health status, right? So many things to think about when we're looking at what carb ratios are optimal for the individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be remiss if I didn't. I know I keep circling back to the jaw. You're like, oh, I'm having flashbacks. But sleep, you can't have healthy sleep without a healthy airway. So do you recall a time as kids or young women, I mean, you're still young women, but teenagers, that your dad said, okay, we need to have the talk, not that talk, but the airway talk?
I actually don't specifically remember that, but she has a better memory of mine. But we actually interviewed our dad for the 3rd time on our podcast recently. And this never came up before, but I was a thumb sucker for a very long time, way later than I should have been. And we found out on this recent interview that was actually, it's kind of like an evolutionary tactic to expand the airway. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing, because that was my way of creating more space. I was just thought like, oh, I had a problem. I, addicted to the thumb sucking. I couldn't get over it. But he was like, no, actually it could have been helping you. But I had retainers. I don't remember ever a specific conversation. He probably was kind of dripping it out. modeling that to us, right?
And did you
I'm
ladies
curious if
have
you have a different
your,
experience, Renee.
did you have the expander or your upper jaw, the maxilla expanded when you were young?
No,
No?
no.
Yeah. I mean, I've always had enough space for 32 teeth, which I think is like the first sign. I mean, how many Americans have had all their wisdom teeth taken out and maybe more teeth? Even our dad was victim of that. I think it was probably bigger back when he was a teenager, but they were just removing teeth just to
Mhm.
make space. And he actually had a very narrow jaw before he got into the work he's doing. So I think the fact that I've had enough space for 32 teeth was a good sign that my jaw was a pretty good shape. And I've done multiple home sleep studies through our dad, and everything comes back a-okay. So that's pretty good fortunately.
But also to circle back
Absolutely.
to our nutrition as kids, even though we ate, the TV dinners and PB&J, we didn't have a ton of sugar around. And we did have all, we had the fat soluble vitamins. We did eat real food. So I think we had a healthy, we had healthy teeth and had healthy jaw growth to begin with. We don't have like the onslaught of sugar and processed foods that kids do now. And, it's getting progressively worse with each
Yeah,
decade. But I think we kind of slid in right at the beginning of the processed foods where it wasn't quite as detrimental. I'm glad I was an 80s baby, not after that, because it just got worse. It's getting worse for parents.
yeah, absolutely. And I think with, the airway issue, the jaw issue, I know there's a bioanthropological lab in Paris, and the lady, I forget her name, who's the head of it, but she's examined skulls from, like the 1800s or 1700s up until now. And she talks about how we've started growing more vertically and less transversely or horizontally,
Mm-hmm.
and the impact, because, and you ladies I'm sure know this, but the trigeminal nerve and the vagus nerve feed into the same nucleus. And
Yeah.
so it's not even just a matter, I mean, oxygen obviously is incredibly important, but it's beyond that. It's the whole autonomic nervous system can be off just from a jaw problem. And if you look, I mean, I know I probably sound like your dad right now, but if you look in nature, you don't really see crowded teeth. I mean, hardly ever, you know? And
Mhm.
so, like, what's more important, oxygen or perfectly straight teeth? I'm gonna go with the oxygen.
Yeah. And we were exposed to Dr. Weston A. Price's work too as kids. So our dad was very familiar with that. Actually, I think our dad was introduced more to Weston Price's research on root canals.
Mhm.
That was how he came into it. And he said, oh, wait, Weston Price also did research on what nutrition does to the mouth. And you can see the pictures in his book, right? Where these perfectly beautiful straight teeth and full jaws just from eating from the land. And then within one generation of them introducing white sugar, white flour, um, all that junk, crowded teeth, cavities, all these issues. So, and actually I never had a cavity until I told you briefly before we jumped on, hit record, how I had an accident, broke my jaw. I lost multiple teeth. I do get cavities every once in a while now, more just because I've had some issues there. But as a kid, never had cavities, and we never had fluoride either, which is an interesting
Wow.
thing.
I'll tell you a quick story. A colleague of mine, she's outside of Philadelphia. She's an occupational therapist. Her daughter, when she was like, I think 6, she was at like a career day type thing in her elementary school, and there was a dentist. He's talking about the importance of fluoride, and she raises her hand and says, "Sir, do you know that fluoride lowers your IQ? It calcifies the pineal gland." And he goes, "Where did you learn that?" And she goes, "My dentist." And he goes, "Well, you might want to find a new dentist." And she goes, "You might want to find a new dental school."
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that
Oh, I
answer.
I have a funny fluoride story from the 90s. I don't know if you remember when I think it was Dannon came out with these little plastic water bottles with
Mhm.
fluoride, and they marketed it as
Yeah.
fluoridated water for kids. And when I was in middle school and I was more aware of the issue with fluoride, thanks to mom and dad, I would actually keep a post-it note and a pen on me. And every time I would go to the grocery store with my mom, I would write, "This is toxic. Don't drink this. Don't give this to your kids." And I would stick it on all the water cases at the local grocery
That's
store.
awesome.
What? You were health coaching in 1998?
Yeah, who
And
knew?
that might have led into your career of crime, breaking into hotel air conditioning units.
Yeah, just a
That
ninja for
that was
life.
Yes. Priorities. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Oh my God.
Lauren, I know Renee told us about how she, left her job in international business, but you were a dancer. I think you both were dancers, but out of college, did you work in a more traditional corporate job?
No, so I went to school for performance and then I started dancing with dance companies, realized there wasn't a lot of money there. So I got into musical theater actually, and I ended up performing on Broadway for about 10 years
Oh,
and was quite successful doing that. It was really awesome. But got sucked into the New York City rat race, just constantly going. Really poor circadian rhythm because the hours in theater are terrible, not a lot of sunshine. The theaters are quite toxic and moldy. And then on top of that, I was interested in exercise. So I got a job at a gym right out of college, mostly because I wanted a free gym membership.
huh.
But they asked me to be a trainer. So I got trained. And so I was personal training all through my Broadway career. So I was working a dual career in exercise and Broadway. And then that funneled into health coaching. So I was always like doing way too much. I was like, I got it. I'm resilient. And, at some point, things just start breaking down. You're like, I don't feel like myself anymore. So that was kind of my beginning of realizing I can actually take feedback from my body to figure out what is the right path, how to navigate and make better choices. Because I was like, oh, I'm doing what everyone else is doing. I'm doing what I'm told to do. I'm told that like lots of exercise is good. I'm told that, you go to work and no one was talking about health hygiene at Broadway. That's like, no one talks
Yeah.
about that. You eat dinner at 11 p.m., you stay up till 3, rinse and repeat, So, yeah, a little bit of a breakdown there. And then it was just working my way back to actually listening to feedback from my body. And that's a really big part of our work now, even though we're really into data quantification and biohacking tech. It's really important to us that we get subjective feedback from the body because we think you can be your own best guru, right? But our culture doesn't teach, especially females, to listen.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
so way back in.
and I think a lot of people, say, oh, the heart's dumb, the gut's dumb, you got to be more cerebral. But every time I've gone against my gut, it comes back to bite me in the rear end
Oh yeah.
every single
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
metabolic health, like you ladies are obviously both very fit, and I know you both have a dance background, but metabolic health overall. So we talked about some of the root causes of why overall Americans have poor metabolic health. But how does that play a role in mental health? Can you touch on that?
Yeah, I think probably the way in is talking about insulin, which is a hormone that essentially directs where glucose goes in the body. We have insulin receptors all over the body. And when we kind of assault our glucose metabolism through whether it's processed food or poor sleep, like Renee mentioned, a night of poor sleep really disrupts glucose. So I have a lot of clients coming to me saying, I can't eat carbohydrates. I'm like, no, you just need to sleep more and then maybe you'll be able to metabolize them better. Right? It's not always a food focused conversation. We have to look at that architecture of all the lifestyle, behavioral aspects because our glucose metabolism will take a hit, right? It's like a stress to the body. We create inflammation. And when we create inflammation, we create neuroinflammation. When we have too much stress, we get leaky gut. Leaky gut becomes leaky brain. And so the glucose metabolism is really like a cool window into your physiology to see how all of these lifestyle factors are affecting your physiology, your metabolism. But there's a high correlation there with insulin resistance, byproduct of poor glucose metabolism, inflammation in the body, neuroinflammation. And we could really say that any mental health disorder, mental health imbalance, mental illness, whatever you want to call it, sometimes those categories can be triggering for people, but it can be anything on the spectrum from mood disorders, poor mood, motivation, anxiety, depression, and then even neurodegenerative conditions, which are further down the spectrum. But we could say that's all an inflammatory metabolic issue. And so, yeah, to kind of circle back, it's like looking at your glucose metabolism with something like a continuous glucose monitor is a great window into seeing what in your life or in your daily life is affecting your body. And can we start to make changes based on that feedback that we're getting?
Absolutely. You have anything to add, Renee?
Yeah, I mean, I also like to look at like the autonomic nervous system and the role that plays in both metabolic and mental health, because yeah, obviously most people are kind of thriving, I'll put that in quotes, in that sympathetic state, right? Go, 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 get all the things done on the to-do list. But it's like, how can we incorporate more of that parasympathetic activity? And, it's not that sympathetic is bad, right? We need that. We need that when we're giving a presentation, when we're on a podcast, when we're at the gym. But people are lacking that parasympathetic activity. And I think that's where something like heart rate variability can be really helpful in addressing metabolic health and mental health, because we can use something like an Oura Ring, BioStrap, just to at least get an HRV measurement overnight and see what is happening with my body. How am I responding to what I did yesterday or the last 3 days? Am I ready to go do that intense workout, or do I need to take it a little bit easier? And I think when we can balance those out and really like give the body what it needs from a stress management perspective, then we can thrive in other areas. And especially with mental health, I think this resiliency we can create with a higher HRV. And side note, I will say higher HRV is a very like vague thing. Like, do not compare your HRV to someone else. Like if your baseline is 30, that's fine. If your baseline's 150, that's fine. But to you, what does a higher HRV look like? Do you go from 30 to 50, or do you go 30 to 10, right? We can all just look at our own baseline. But anyways, I think using HRV, using things like breath work, mindfulness, meditation, HRV biofeedback to create that resiliency in the nervous system, we can see better mood, more motivation. We actually have even seen research in people that have lower HRVs tend to have depression, anxiety, PTSD, right? All of those things. So I think looking at the nervous system is essential for both metabolic and mental health.
One thing I've seen you ladies post about almost every topic that I know of, except, and you probably posted about it and I just didn't see it, cold plunges. Do you ladies,
Oh,
do you do cold plunges?
Oh yeah.
Lauren's the
Okay.
cold queen. She's the cold queen.
Yeah,
Which-
yeah. We love cold.
Which one? You don't have to tell me if you don't want, but the brand, the tub.
Oh, so the one that I use because my dad has it currently is the Plunge. It's kind of that sleek white porcelain. It's angled. You can lay in it, so it's more of a horizontal tub as opposed to the barrels that are horizontal.
Right.
Yeah, I'm the cold plunge gal, and Renee is the sauna gal. It's kind of the contrast that we have. Yeah, I love cold plunging for so many reasons. I think mainly the mental emotional benefits, like just doing hard things and getting that resiliency, right? We get a flood of sympathetic when we get into the cold because it's your body protecting you, saying, hey, this is scary. Like we got to do what we need to do to survive. We can thank our bodies for kicking in and trying to protect us. But once we get past that, people say that 30-second mark, then we actually have control and we get this flood of endorphins and like other feel-good neurotransmitters. There's a lot of physiological downstream effects, but I think that the mental emotional piece is probably the most beneficial. But as female biohackers, we have to introduce cycle syncing into this. For women, we shouldn't be doing cold plunging too often. And also the research is showing diminishing effects after 11 or 12 minutes. So potentially you can do it too much. It's a hormetic stressor. We want to consider it into the context of all of our lifestyle choices.
Your allostatic load,
stress,
basically.
Yeah. How much stress do you have in your life? You wouldn't want to stack fasting, intense exercise, cold plunge, a hard day at work, arguments with your kids, or, yelling at the phone company online. We don't want to stack all these things in one day. We want to create some balance. And that's where we really get the benefits of hormesis. So it's being really strategic with that dosing.
Practically speaking, I hear this from clients and patients all the time. And I actually have the question for myself because I'm a weenie when it comes to cold plunges. I have a cryotherapy helmet, some other like spot treatments. The sauna I'm fine with. I love it. But if I walk out in my backyard, there's probably 6 houses that can see into my backyard, even though it's fenced. How do you go about, like, if you're in a major city and you're in like a condo building? Like now, I just interviewed a biohacker, Jean Falacara, Cyborg Games, the other day, and he's in Miami, and his building has a cold plunge device. That's when you know you're a yuppie.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
That's fancy. That's
awesome.
fancy. That's probably coming though. I think it's gonna be everywhere.
Yeah, we'll start.
But how do
seeing
you
more and more.
ladies do it? Because, well, I think I don't know if it's one of the Zoom filters, but it looks like the ocean in the background.
Oh no, I tricked you.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So how do you
So I
ladies
don't
do
have
it?
I don't have a proper cold plunge here
Oh,
in New York. So right now I just utilize cold showers, which is a free and accessible way to just get a dose of that shivering, we
mhm.
train the parasympathetic there because cold shower is actually, I think, more aggressive than a cold plunge. There are additional benefits to like a full immersion in the plunge, but it's not for everybody. It can be time consuming, cost money, whether you're filling it up with ice or you get a more expensive plunger with a chiller in it. I think everybody has a shower. So, you know, 30 seconds, 2 minutes. The whole point is to rise to your level of discomfort. So I do think it's actually harder to be in the shower. I don't love it because you're being pelted with cold water, but
Right.
I try to shower every day. And so I always have like cold water opportunity, It's like,
Right.
what's my excuse here?
There you go. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I mean, it's tough for me. And I mean, I've been gradually doing it and then I'll get lax with it for a while. But Renee, how do you have a cold plunge tank or tub at your house?
I
Hell
don't.
no.
No, so I'm with you. I hate all the cold stuff. There's a reason I moved to Las Vegas. I love the heat. I also have an infrared sauna in my house. And I actually use that 4 days a week. So I'm pretty hardcore with my sauna practice. And then cold, yeah, I'll try and finish my shower with just 30 seconds of cold. That's like painful enough for me. It's just something. And then sometimes when I do the sauna, I'll then go jump in the pool, which I know some cold plungers will laugh, but it's probably like 60 to 65 degrees. But for me, that is freezing. So
Mhm.
I'll jump in, I'll stay in until I shiver and then I get out.
Yeah. Well, it's all to your
That's,
tolerance, right? Like the whole point is
yeah.
adaptation. We were
Right.
just in Austin for a trip and so hot. It's so humid there. And I have a girlfriend that is not heat adapted because she sits in air conditioning all the time. She lives in LA, doesn't spend a lot of time outdoors, and the weather there is like pretty moderate. She couldn't handle the heat. And there's a lot of heat waves happening right now. And I'm not saying like everyone needs to sit in a sauna or a cold plunge and be uncomfortable, but the whole point of it is to adapt so that we're not in these situations that we can't control where our body is freaking out. And then we have these downstream effects where we faint or we get sick or nauseous. Like that's not advantageous. So
Right.
if we can control these hormetic stressors and dose them in, then we're prepared for life, right?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Have you seen people's HRV scores change significantly after doing, say, a cold shower or say cold showers for a month versus, only seeing dramatic increases after they do a cold plunge?
Yeah, I've seen steady rises in people that are dosing it correctly, especially women that are doing it right with their cycle. Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure.
And so what days of the cycle do you recommend like not um or doing too much or doing less? How does that work?
I would say in general, during the luteal phase, when your progesterone is rising, generally around days 18 to 22, that tends to be a really vulnerable time. Even after that, because once the hormones drop off right before the bleed for women, our immune system becomes really vulnerable. I know for me, like I have to be really careful with scheduling, travel, social events, even my exercise in that time. Because if I'm going to get sick, that's when it happens
Mhm.
typically. So I'm really careful with just any additional stressors. And that includes the good ones, the hormetic stressors. So I would say just in general, like luteal phase, end of the cycle for women.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
have you had any clients or case studies who had quote unquote mental health conditions, anxiety, depression, brain fog, things of that nature, who got significantly better after introducing cold?
Hmm.
I'm one person that's coming to mind is actually a colleague, not a client, but it has changed her relationship to her emotional health.
Wow.
And yeah, it was always something that scared her. And then she was like, I'm gonna do the scary thing. I'm gonna do the hard thing. And now she has, like a healthy addiction to it. We could talk about addiction because that's
Yeah.
the question is always like, are we replacing one habit with another one? But she is so much happier. Her mood is very stable. Um, it's kind of like sunshine and rainbows for her. So that's been really cool to witness that for someone that was always deathly afraid of it, never did it. And now it's just a staple in her routine.
And Renee, do you have any stories to share?
I don't. Not about
She's
cold
like,
plunging.
cold, la, la, la.
I tell my clients to just to do it. I'm like, don't watch what I do, but you should do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Same
most
here.
of my male, especially biohacker clients, like they love it. It's like not a problem. They just do it.
Right.
But yeah, I haven't really paid attention to HRV. I have seen some improvements in HRV from people doing the sauna. And I think that's probably due to like the passive cardio effect, the cardiovascular benefits.
Right.
Maybe why my HRV is so high, because I love
And the
sauna.
parasympathetic tone, right?
Right. Yeah,
And
getting that detoxification and sweat and immune boost for the heat shock proteins all when you're in a parasympathetic state. I mean, how else can you get that? That's just incredible.
yeah, and one thing I wanted to touch on, because you ladies have both mentioned, doing too much, even in terms of hormetic stressors. So we tend to think of, okay, sauna's good, cold plunge is good, and then we'll do PMF. And, if you're toxic and your drainage pathways are not open, you could really mess yourself up. Talk about the concept of less is often more.
So
Yeah.
many ways to go with this, but I would think just to zoom out, doing less gives us an opportunity to actually talk to our bodies. I could easily fill every second of my day biohacking, and it would be so much fun to me. I would love it. But the doing never gives that space for our body to say, I'm feeling this, this is happening. What emotions are stored that are not allowed to talk to us, right? Like we get our greatest feedback just from the body being honest. And so if you're constantly doing, if you've jam-packed your schedule and your calendar, how do you know how your body's responding?
Absolutely.
So simply just doing less, being more is a principle that we really like to share with our clients. But yeah, I mean, if you're jamming up your detox pathways and doing too much too fast, I would imagine you're going to feel like crap. And I've seen people feel like crap. More is not better.
Right.
More is definitely not better.
Yeah. And for me, actually, when I got really sick in my early 20s, because I was go, I was doing all the things. Actually, our dad found this thing called the light portal. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's now called the Life Force. There's only, I think, 7 in the United States. But I was struggling with chronic fatigue syndrome. All my labs were normal. The doctor said, you just need to sleep more. And my dad said, there's a light portal in Tampa, Florida, where I was living at the time. He said, will you go try it out for me? Sure, why not? I go in there and I lay in there for an hour, and it's using vibration, crystals, color therapy, binaural beats. The wood is made from like the most amazing wood you can make violins out of. It's just so peaceful, the ultimate parasympathetic activity. And I laid in there and just felt alive again. Like my brain turned on. I was creative. I could really tune into my body. I was like, what is happening? And that was my first introduction to what it's like to get out of that sympathetic state into that. And so, and that was 15 years ago. And so since then, I have learned how to tap into that same feeling, right? That parasympathetic state with meditation, brain tap, different devices. But just when you can get into that state, your body tells you so many things. It tells you what it needs. So if you can just tap into that and listen, so really slowing down. And for our, the type A's, it's hard. It's hard for us to stop and slow down. But when we do, that's where the magic happens. And I have to say, I also had an experience where I tried this detox where, I don't know, are you familiar with mud packing? Yeah. So I did mud packing, and I'm like, I'm healthy. I'm going to do my hands, my feet, my liver, my intestines. I'm going to do it all in one day. I got so sick. And I'm like, how could a little like mud application make you so sick? But it showed me, one, the power of this detoxification tool, but 2, that I'm not superwoman and that I can't do all the things in one day. So I've had multiple experiences that have just been like, hey, you have to do it in small doses. And I think that's also why I fell in love with using HRV, because I think that's the best measurement for people to really see if they're recovering. So how often can you do the cold plunge? How often can you do that high intensity workout? How often can you do the sauna, fasting, all the things? Are you bouncing back from that hormetic stressor? And I think HRV is the best way to find out if you are.
Yeah. I think we'll get more out of our exercise if we can do that. Like we talked about those people that wake up super early and no matter what, they go and do their exercise and maybe they're cutting out quality sleep time. I'm not saying that everyone does that, but what would happen if we did test the HRV and looked at sleep data to find out like recovery is actually going to make that time, less time in exercise, more productive because we're focusing on the recovery. And I think it's not talked about enough. And I think it is starting to come out, but the data really shines there because I think we're just so out of tune with what's actually happening. We start to tell ourselves a story that this is normal and everyone's feeling this way. And how could there possibly be anything else other than what I'm feeling today? And
And I think that touches on, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
no, go ahead.
but the whole point of common versus normal. Because when I hear people say, this is normal, I know, 19 people who have this. What they're really saying is this is common because they know a lot of people with it. But I also know a lot of people addicted to heroin. That doesn't mean it's healthy, right? I mean, I know that's an extreme example, but the other thing I've heard both you ladies say slightly differently is that there's a big difference between being fit and being healthy. If you pursue health, you will likely end up fit also, assuming that you're moving. But if you just pursue fitness, it can come at the exclusion of health.
Yeah, I think that's a big fallacy in the weight loss or fitness world is that we lose weight to be healthy, but actually you have to get healthy to lose weight. And some people aren't willing to do those things that they need to do to bring their body back into homeostasis. They're just like, burn more calories. Yes, actually, calories out versus calories in works if we're not like overtaken by toxins and stressors and have a low HRV and have terrible sleep, right? Like potentially that equation is very, very powerful. But yeah, we have to get healthy first. And that just comes back to the simple blueprint that we talked about. Consistent sleep wake times, starting to clean out all the products in your home, not doing an overhaul tomorrow because that could be quite expensive, but like just slowly chip away. When you run out of something, can you replace it with something better? Can you find more moments in your day just to do less and be with your body? I think that's the point of meditation, right? I think it's introduced in the wrong way to our culture where we're taught that we have to sit and clear our mind, which I think is a strategy, but I think it's actually the opportunity to let your body talk to you. Can you sit there with a journal, close your eyes, and just wait for that feedback? Because it does come if you sit there long enough.
Yeah, and as a culture, I think we're emotionally constipated. We're taught to ignore our feelings.
Yeah.
And so, most people, they got to have the TV on. They got to have, emails coming in, text, neighbors knocking on the front door. Like they can't just be, like you said, with the journal or, just closing their eyes, reducing sensory input, things like that. And so, one thing I've heard
pet peeve, the TV on all the time. I'm like, I can't hear my body.
And we're focused so much on what we put in our mouths, but what goes in our nervous system is just as important, in my experience.
Yeah. And I will say the idea of being, I didn't realize I had a hard time being until I did a plant medicine journey down in Costa Rica, actually. And I got a couple hours into it and I'm like, I just want to be off the ride. I don't want to do this anymore. And my guide was like, you have a hard time just being in the moment. I'm like such a forward thinker, planner, go. And he was like, you need to sit in this discomfort. It was truly uncomfortable to feel the being. And I think the plant medicine kind of teaches us that. And so I've been working on that since then, but it was very eye-opening to realize that I'm a doer. I'm a doer and I need to be more of a beer.
I think that's what drives addictive tendencies and OCD and type A, right? We're running away from discomfort. But what is the worst part of that? Like what's on the other side of the discomfort? What's the worst that can happen?
Right.
People never even give it the chance to come up. Like it's just a signal. Your body is trying to tell you something. And we're like, nope. We don't know what it's going to be, but we don't want to hear it. So we're just going to do other things to distract our body. But like what happens? And that is the beauty, I think, of plant medicine. Not that it's for everyone, but something that's been afforded to both of us. What happens when you have to sit in that?
Right. It can
It's
be
not
very
that
uncomfortable,
bad.
I think.
It's not
Yeah.
that bad. What comes
Yeah.
up.
Right. And I think, a lot of times people are going, to other countries and doing plant medicine ceremonies. I haven't done one yet. Um, but I plan on doing it in the future. But I would say people, they don't process. They just want to take the medication or the plant medicine. They think that that's just going to do everything, but you still got to do the work, right?
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
the integration is probably more important than the actual ceremony. But you're right, you do see these people that just go back and back and back. And it's like, well, are you just using that as an escape in the moment? But like I did this back in December and I'm still integrating and processing it. I'm not ready for another one anytime soon.
Right.
But we see that in the biohacking space too, where people are
Yeah.
addicted to their data and to tech and trying new things. It's like, take a chill pill, take some time out and see if you can integrate it. And that's something I do with my clients with CGMs. People are like, I can never take it off because I'm going to like behave poorly. I'm like, well, the whole point is to change your behaviors and get you like so addicted to feeling good and eating well and nourishing your body so you don't need this piece of tech. But again, it's like avoiding that work. And I think a lot of it is just the fear mindset really overrides. And it's, again, not as bad as people imagine it to be.
Absolutely. You ladies are a wealth of knowledge. If I had to ask both of you, what's one thing you know today that you wish you would have known 10, 12, or even 15 years ago, what would you ladies say?
Less is more.
I
Definitely
know,
less
right?
is more. And I think that goes, I'll just give specific examples. Eating slowly was just something I can't stop talking about these days, like the power of chewing, which is really powerful for both metabolic and mental health. So many of us are running around, we're like crazy about what we're eating, but we're eating it so fast. And so our body doesn't get the chance to digest, absorb nutrients, metabolize properly. It's like, no wonder we all have anxiety. And I think with movement too, like slow is not only
Oh, yeah.
revealing, but so healing. So I wish I had that mantra like on my wall as a child. Less is more.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Renee, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely could have used that advice 15, 20 years ago. That would have been great. I think I might have to circle back to sleep. I think, if they could put, I say they, big pharma, whoever, could put sleep in a pill, everyone would buy it.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, when you think about the regeneration and recovery, the lymphatic system, what it's doing to the brain overnight, I mean, it's incredible what the human body does during your hours of sleep. And for so many years, I was only getting 4 or 5 hours a night. I mean, I was missing out on so much for my health. And so now I'm like 9 hours every night. Don't fight me. Sleep is my number one. Like I will cut out whatever. I'll cut
Serious.
out. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, I don't do calls before 9:30 in the morning because my morning is my time. And I will cut out exercise. I will cut out whatever I need to make sure that sleep is number one. And I still think most Americans need to prioritize sleep.
And it's incredibly anabolic. I mean, there's a reason bodybuilders are very adamant about going to bed, 9:30 p.m.
Athletes
Yeah.
too. Don't
Oh,
mess with
yeah.
their sleep. Yeah.
But
Right.
there are guys at my gym, guys get very defensive, especially the younger ones. Girls, when I try to teach them stuff, they know I'm not, trying to be creepy. I'm just trying to correct, okay, like you might want to make sure it's coming from your hip, not your lumbar spine, check, your heavy metal levels, things like that. But guys, I'll, try to give a tip here or there because I don't want to see anyone get hurt if I can help prevent it. But, they get very defensive, like, oh, my program was written by an IFBB or someone who was almost an IFBB bodybuilder. Okay. And then 3 weeks later, the guy shows up injured. But it's so interesting. I think if you take your ego out of it, there's always something to learn. We're going to put up all your links to your website and podcast, and especially a link to the video of Renee hacking into the AC unit in a hotel.
Good. I reference that one often. I'm like, how did she do it?
Like, I want that to be at the top of Google. Like if you Google biohacker babes, I want that video to be.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Let's make it go viral, please.
Let's do it. They thought Kim Kardashian broke the internet. Renee's going to break the internet.
And all the AC units in hotels.
And all the AC units. There you go.
We'll all get better sleep
hotel
for it.
owners, Hide your AC unit controls.
Renee's
Don't
coming
get
to
me-
town.
Yeah, don't
That's
get me
right.
banned. Don't get me banned from the Vegas hotels.
Yeah, they'll have like, they'll look at, oh, no, sorry, no rooms available.
Yeah, sold out. Sorry.
I know you ladies are
Thank you.
incredibly busy, so I want to be respectful of your time, but thank you so much for coming on the show. You're a wealth of knowledge. Thank you for the work that both of you are doing. And hopefully we can have you back on next year for a follow-up.
Thank
Would
you.
love that.
So fun
Thank you.
chatting with you. Very honored to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this has
Take
been great.
care.
Bye.